Hello, hello. Hi, hi. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to live a life where you feel happier, less anxious, you have more passion, you have more purpose, you're listening more to your intuition rather than your emotions. And then I'm also going to change outfits a couple times, and I'm going to be using a few visual triggers just to kind of, keep it interesting. But the focus of the video is going to be like on the message rather than the clothes that I'm wearing. So I'm not going to be talking about the outfits. I'm just going to be talking to you about the message that I want to deliver to you. So first I'm going to talk about why I think a lot of us are feeling more anxious and depressed, and then I'm going to talk about how to go about fixing that. So the more that we advance as a culture, I feel like the more we regress and pull away from our true natures. So there was like this sort of, challenge, what have you, going on social media recently, where I was asking girlfriends to ask their boyfriends or their husbands how often they think about the Roman Empire. And the strange, sort of surprising thing that came up was that so many men were thinking about the Roman Empire on a pretty regular basis. And this was a lot of people, from all different walks of life. And so you kind of have to wonder why. Why is that? Why are we drawn towards the past? Why are we drawn towards so many shows where survival is at stake, and where we aren't trapped by all these modern devices? Think about shows like Survivor or Alone, or even shows that focus on some sort of apocalypse or zombie invasion. What they have in common is that people are, they're no longer working at their normal 9-to-5 jobs. They're no longer in the rat race, no longer trapped by the fabric of this society. They are only focused on their survival. And why, on some subconscious level, are we attracted to that? Why are we attracted to a time when we were actually fighting to stay alive versus having all these modern conveniences? And the thing is, even though our lives have gotten so much easier by technology, I think it feels unnatural to us. I'll tell you why I think that. So there's really a multitude of reasons, but touch on a few. So one, back then we were eating food that was real food. Not all these synthetic chemicals and processed things that are found on the store shelves. We were eating real fruits, vegetables, and meats, and not fueling our bodies with things that were never meant to be ingested. All these names of ingredients you can't even pronounce. Two, we were physically active. We were outside in the sun most of the day. We weren't sedentary. We weren't sitting at a desk typing under artificial lamps. We were whether we were fighting for survival or fighting for something we believed in. We had passion and a purpose. And I think all of those things are very important for happiness. I think it's essential to be outdoors, getting actual sunlight on your body. I think it's essential to fighting for something that you believe in and having a purpose and a direction. And I think that it's essential to be physically active and to have a healthy, strong body. I think it's very challenging to have a healthy mind without having a healthy body. I do think those two are connected. The body and the brain are very, very intertwined with one another. And one has a very big impact on how the other is operating. So we're exerting ourselves less, we're getting less of a release of physical energy. We're also avoiding our thoughts more. And I think that very often anxiety can be a result of energy that is forcing its way to be released and working its way to the surface, whether that's trapped physical energy or trapped emotional energy that is suppressed. It's going to find a way out. So I think because of our phones that we carry around with us everywhere we go, we've become accustomed to, if we're feeling a little bit unhappy, a little on edge, some emotions starting to poke through, we've learned to distract ourselves with either television or social media or something to get our mind off of what's going on internally instead of like being in it, processing it, walking through it. And while, we can lie to ourselves, we can't lie to our bodies. Our bodies are going to tell us whether or not we're truly over something. No matter how often we tell ourselves, we're fine, we're over it. Your body's going to tell you when you're really over it. And your body and your mind are going to continue to hold on to emotions and things that you're not allowing yourself to deal with, that you just keep pushing down. So how do we start to listen to ourselves? Well, for one thing, set down the phone. It's very important to acknowledge what we're feeling. So here's like some tips on how to do that. So a tip that I find very helpful is journaling. And it can be very, very good at getting rid of or managing intrusive thoughts. So there's a technique that I like a lot where, it's very difficult to tell yourself to just stop thinking about something that's bothering you. It's almost like the more we tell ourselves not to think about something, the more it's going to keep trying to find its way in. So a way of sort of like managing that is to give yourself a designated time, not right before bed, but some sort of more benign time of day, like maybe 2 o'clock. And you're going to set a timer for, let's say, like 5 or 10 minutes. And in that time, you're going to write down every single intrusive thought, every worry, every fear, everything, all the worst case scenarios, and get them out of you and onto the paper. So there's a couple of purposes that this serves. One, it's cathartic to actually purge yourself of all these things that you're holding inside of you. And two, you're giving yourself a designated time to let them come out. And you're taking control of them rather than letting them control you. You're not saying, I'm never going to think about this. And you're not allowing them to just run, rampant in your head all day long and wreak havoc. You're telling them you're allowed in at this specific time and only for this long, and then that's enough, and then you have to go away. And that can really be helpful in sort of like taking your power back. If you feel a thought starting to come on, you can tell yourself, I'm not dealing with that right now. I'll just wait till 2 o'clock. So you're not saying no to yourself and you're not suppressing it. You're just telling it a specific time that it can come back. And then you get it all out on paper and then you're done for that day. And you're not going to allow yourself to obsess on those things until tomorrow at the same time. So that's like one tip that can be helpful. Another thing to keep in mind when you're journaling is this isn't school. School ruins a lot of things, including writing, because we become so accustomed to feeling obligated to choose the perfect word, to be eloquent, that we're going to be judged. It's actually best if you are just as raw as possible. You just write exactly what is in your head. You don't try to pretty it up at all. The first word that comes into your head is the most authentic. So don't try to make it sound good. Just let it come out. Write as quickly and without as much thought as possible. Let it just be literally just purging yourself of whatever is inside, and don't make it pretty. So I want to talk on listening to our intuition versus listening to our emotions, and how they are not the same thing and they are not to be confused with one another. Alright, so your emotions are like the more primitive part of your brain. They're just sort of like a, physiological, biological response to some stimulus, whether it's jealousy or anger or fear, And then your intuition is that sort of quieter, sort of more spiritual part of yourself. This voice that's in you that's trying to guide you and set you on the right path. But often we mistake our emotions as the true voice because they're louder and they get a lot more attention than our intuition. So our emotions often cloud our better judgment. Think about times in your life when maybe you've really wanted to try something, there's something that like calls to you and you feel drawn to it, but then fear gets in the way and you start thinking thoughts like, oh, you'll never be able to accomplish that. You'll never be able to achieve that. And then you let that fear convince you that that is the right choice. And you listen to that part of yourself versus your inner voice that's trying to tell you that you need to go for it. Emotions, lots of times, lie to us. They also make us sloppy. Think about sports teams or fighters when they start playing with emotion. Think about like Mike Tyson. Think about that famous fight between Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. You know, Mike Tyson felt that things were not going fairly, and so his ego got involved and he got very angry, and then he bit Evander Holyfield on the ear twice. You know, you would think that having your emotions come into play and getting angry would cause you to be a better fighter, to play better sports, to speak more eloquently when you're angry, but it's always the opposite. You know, emotions are chaotic, and then they have you being sloppy. And your focus and your awareness become compromised because your emotions are getting in the way. Now think about like a situation you're your most sharp and you're most level-headed and you're playing your best and you're speaking your best. It's when you're able to sort of push your emotions aside and really focus your attentions on whatever the challenge ahead is. You're thinking clearly versus just being reactive. When you're allowing your emotions to control you, you are not in control. You're just like a slave to whatever circumstances that are happening around you that are causing you to react in a certain way that you are not in control of. We want to be the one that's in the driver's seat. We don't want our emotions to be the ones in the driver's seat dictating what happens next. A good way to learn to control your emotions is through meditation. Being able to sit alone in your thoughts, doing deep breathing exercises. I used to always think like that was such like hogwash, I guess, like, you know, deep breathing and meditation and whatnot, but when you realize like the important connection between the mind and the body and how much more control you can have over yourself once you learn to strengthen your mind. It's also important to get to know ourselves on more than just like a surface level. It's easiest to get to know ourselves just based on like our personalities and like the things that we see on the surface, but there's like a very deep part of us that is below the surface that needs to be nourished and needs to be attended to. And if you're only rewarding and feeding the parts of yourself that are on the surface, those those deeper parts are going to start feeling very starved and unsatisfied. We don't become happy by feeding and nourishing only the ego and not attending to the authentic self. So, think about all the super rich, wealthy people there are out there in the world. Maybe you've met a few. They have the perfect house. They drive the perfect car. They have every outward material possession that one could possess, and they're so miserable. Because your spirit doesn't care what car you're driving. Your spirit doesn't care what house you're living on. You can have every physical possession in the world and still be starving. If you're only rewarding the ego and you're only feeding the ego, that is not the key to happiness. You'll never be able to buy enough things to make yourself happy. What we need to be happy is passion and purpose. I don't know if you've seen the movie Citizen Kane, but it's the story of a man who possesses everything a man could ever possess. And on his deathbed, what he's thinking about is the little sled he used to ride down the hill in front of his house, because that was the happiest time of his life. And his dying words are Rosebud, which was the name that was on his sled. So you might be asking, how do you find your passion? How do you find your purpose? Well, I think it's important to retrace your steps. There was a time in your life when you were a kid, when you were doing things simply for the sake of enjoyment. You weren't thinking about how this was going to make you look. You weren't thinking if it was going to lead to some sort of financial success. You just enjoyed doing it, whether it was drawing or building a fort or riding your skateboard or surfing or whatever it was. You just enjoyed it, and it brought you happiness. And happiness is a barometer by which you should measure if something is worth doing or not. If you feel good doing something, don't let anyone put a judgment on that, whether it's trivial or a waste of time. And I'm not saying that you base your entire life around, surfing or rock climbing or whatever your passion is, but you make an effort to carve out time to do the thing that makes you happy. And if you haven't found your passion yet, don't be discouraged. I doubt you've tried every single thing that there is to try in this world. What have you tried? Maybe 10 out of 10 billion? There's so many different things there are that you can experience out there that you've yet to experience. You just have to put yourself out there and keep searching. There's no harm in trying something and realizing that it's not the right fit. So while passion is something that's more about finding fuel for your own soul and your own happiness, purpose is about doing things for someone other than yourself. So if you don't know what you're happy about or what you're passionate about, I used to volunteer at a crisis hotline when I was in college. in the training process, they used to tell us, like, if someone calls up and they say that they're depressed, you know, they have anxiety, you don't say, why? Why do you feel that way? Why? That's a judgmental sort of way of going about it, and often people don't really know off the top of their head. But you kind of have them retrace their steps. You know, you ask questions like, when was the last time you remember feeling happy? What were you doing? What's changed in your life since then? Was there some event that came about that stopped you from doing the things that made you feel happy once? You know, go down that sort of rabbit hole and ask yourself those questions. And maybe you have to go back all the way to like when you were a child. And maybe there was something that you did back when you were a child that brought you happiness. You know, whether it was just going for walks in the woods, drawing in your notebook, reading silly books, playing video games, whatever it is. Don't put any judgment on it or any like value on it as being silly or frivolous. If it made you happy, then it's worth doing. And I know that our lives are hectic and we can't do those things 24/7 anymore, but that doesn't mean we stop doing them altogether. It just means we have to designate a specific time to do them. But don't neglect the part of yourself that's searching for joy and pleasure. And then, like I said, the other part is purpose. And purpose is not about looking inward, it's about looking outward. It's about asking yourself, like, how you can be of service. What you can do to make other people's lives easier, other people's lives nicer. And it can be things that are so simple. You know, I think sometimes people think like, oh, I don't have the financial means to be of service to other people. It's not about that. It can be something so simple as like, you notice someone isn't joining in to a conversation in a room, and you help them join into the conversation. You see someone struggling, carrying something, and you ask if you can help them. You're just aware of subtle ways of making people's lives nicer in the moment. I mean, obviously, if you have the means of doing something bigger, go ahead. But I know a lot of us don't have the time or the means to, like, you know, build someone a new house or something of that caliber. But you always have the time and the means of doing nice, simple gestures. And the interesting thing is, and what makes it seem like there's an intelligence to the universe, is that doing these nice little gestures, it's going to make you feel good. And that's why it seems to me like there's some sort of law in the universe that is sort of trying to get us to be better people. Is that good acts, kind acts, feel good to us. We know that we're not on the right path because it doesn't feel good when we're not on the right path. Use your emotions as a roadmap in the sense of knowing that something is off. If you feel unhappy, it means that you need to change something. Don't be afraid of making changes. And don't be afraid of thinking that something that you want or something that you desire is impossible just because it hasn't been done yet. And just because no one else knows how to do it. Think about, like our ancestors, go back thousands of years. Imagine if we tried to explain to them that one day we'd be getting in airplanes and that one day we'd have these phones, these devices in our pockets, all the information in the world essentially at our fingertips. All these modern day advancements that would have seemed completely impossible, and yet they were never impossible. Nobody had just dreamt them up yet. I think there's very few things that are actually impossible. They just haven't been done yet. And I just want to encourage you to never give up on yourself. To listen to the way that you talk to yourself. Don't say mean things to yourself that you wouldn't allow other people to say to you. Choose the way you speak to yourself. Be encouraging. Be gentle with yourself. We're all doing the best we can in the moment. But never stop striving to be the best, most authentic version of yourself. You are here for a reason. There's things inside you that are different from anybody else on the entire planet. There's things that only you can do, things that only you know based on the life experiences that only you have had. There's only one of you on the billions and billions of people that are out there, and there's only one of you. There's things that only you can talk to us about because you're the only one that has had all of the experiences that you have had. And there's gifts that only you have. And talents only you have. And always see yourself as a work in progress. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. There is no period at the end of this sentence. It just keeps going and going and going. Things change, but they never end. Be open to change. Be open to the fact that there's not only one way of thinking, there's not only one way of doing things. Don't be so rigid. Think about a tree, how it blows in the wind, how they design buildings to withstand earthquakes, to be able to sway. Things that are rigid and have no bend in them break or crumble when there's stress or tension applied. You need to be more flexible. There's not one right way and one wrong way of doing anything. And just allow yourself to be open. Allow your mind to be open. Allow your heart to be open. Don't block yourself off from things and experiences and people. You're not an island. You're not intended to be an island. You're meant to go out and live and love and take risks and fail and succeed and fall down and pick yourself back up and keep going and going and going. Now go out there and seize the fucking day.